so much for joining me again for another video. As always, I'm very grateful for all your previous views, likes and subscriptions. We're going to spend some time thinking a little bit about symbols in Judaism. As we know, symbols are very important in religions. They help to communicate ideas that are complex and maybe beyond human understanding. Where words are not adequate, then that's where symbols can step in. Judaism, like many other faiths, has its own collection of symbols. So I thought we'd just have a look at a few of them, not all of them, and as always, just have a little look at what they can symbolise, and just to see where that takes us. What I did first of all is, as always, I went to Google and had a look at what the language of the Jewish faith, Hebrew, has to say about the word symbol. And the word is ot, and it's a token. It means of the token of the relationship between humanity and God. It's something which shows that relationship between God and his people. And what's really interesting is that, of course, a huge symbol in Judaism is the Shabbat, which is the day of rest, from sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday. And of course, what really struck me is, I never thought of it like this before, is that how not all symbols are seen. That day of rest is hugely important in the Jewish faith. It has its own rituals, in lighting candles, etc. But it really struck me how actually it's not something that you can put in a box, not something you can buy, it's not something that can be necessarily gifted down physically. Shabbat is in so many ways attitudinal. It's a way of those who practice the Jewish faith to acknowledge that God has created them, and acknowledging that creation story of resting for one day of the week. And also what I didn't know, and this is really exciting, is how Shabbat has had a huge influence on language. I was looking at the French language, Samedi, which is French for Saturday, and it has its roots in the Hebrew word Shabbat. And this is a really interesting way about how religion influences us in so many different ways, and is there within the French language and the French culture. And I thought that was really cool. So let's have a look at something else. Another very famous symbol, which most of you, I suspect, have seen in one way or another, is the Star of David. If I remember my mathematics correctly, it's two equilateral triangles placed on top of each other, and it has its roots in King David, who of course was that very famous king. And we ought to do something on King David at some point. I'll put that on my list of things to do. And the story goes is that as with some of these symbols, origins aren't always clear, but I think that's part of the charm and the fun of it, is how it would have been on his shield, his magen, and there it was. Maybe his armies would have had that on their shields when going into battle. But what I didn't realise, oh, there's another thing, sorry, forgive me, another thing as well, which about Star of David, is that there's a myth story, a folklore, if you will, that King Solomon had it on a ring on his finger, and he was able to sort of cast out demons and that sort of thing. If you have a sensible Google, you'll find all sorts of fascinating stories. What I didn't know is actually how relatively late on the Star of David was used as a symbol for the Jewish faith. It wasn't until in the 17th century in Prague, where the Jews there, as part of the diaspora, so if you remember, the Jewish community was spread out across Europe and into other parts of the world, because I didn't have a homeland for such a long time, and they adopted it as a symbol. That's actually quite late on in terms of the age of the Jewish faith. So I just thought that was really interesting. Though the symbol had been around for a long time, it wasn't sort of adopted as like a badge or a way of a talismanic type symbol for Jews until then. And of course, it is worth remembering, and I've mentioned this previously, that these symbols are not worshipped in themselves. And of course, very much Judaism is very much a faith about words as well, isn't it? So you have no images of God, you have no idols to worship. It's about words, and so perhaps maybe that's one of the reasons why took so long for a symbol to be adopted, as it were. I think another image which you may be familiar with is of the menorah, which is a 7-branched candlestick, and the word menorah literally means lamp. Not to be confused, and I've done this so many times, and even when I was piecing this together, I had to remind myself there is a 9-branch candlestick, which is called a Hanukkah, which is used to celebrate the festival of Hanukkah. So we're just talking about the menorah for today, and it's when story goes back to when the Jews had fled from Israel, and they had the 10 Commandments in the Ark of the Covenant. They needed somewhere to put it. This place was called the Tabernacle, and God said to Moses, look, you need to make sure there's some light, and he gave him some directions to make a menorah, and that's where the story comes from. And it's fascinating, isn't it? You might want to think about the role of light in Judaism, whether it's the burning bush for Moses, or it's that pillar of fire that guided them through the desert. But light, even if you remove it from a religious context, is such a powerful thing. It gives us warmth, it gives us able to see things, it casts away darkness, it can offer comfort, you can share stories around it, all sorts of things. And so I think that's something to be aware of. And I think, if I remember correctly, is that the word hearth, we think about fire and a hearth, it's related to the word focus as well. So we think about focus and concentrating, then and a light can do that, can be used as a form of meditation as well, can't it? So I thought that was just really cool as well, about how this idea of light in Judaism can be used, and that is represented in the menorah. Another thing which I knew about, the shofar horn, which is a musical instrument, and it's often blown at the start of certain ceremonies, and I have actually heard it being used, and it really was a hair on the back of the neck's moment. It really is quite remarkable, and it's made from a ram's horn, and that's done because it's a reminder of when Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac, and rather than being sacrificed, a ram was offered instead by God. It's also a reminder as well about how Jews need to feel humble in front of the power of God, and also a reminder of the destruction that the temple went through. There are other reasons as well why it might be symbolic. There's just a few of them, but I think that's very exciting, isn't it? How just a musical instrument can have such depth and such meaning, and mean so much in a particular community. And the last one I just want us to have a look at is this, and this one really blew my mind. And honestly, you could do a whole book on this. It really was fascinating. It's called the Hamza. Sometimes referred to as the hand of God. And the idea is that this is a relatively new symbol in the Jewish faith. And it has lots and lots of possible interpretations. So one interpretation is that it's this idea of, you know, the hand of God being holding the hand of God, and sometimes in the middle as well you'll have an eye, which can show this idea of, you know, God is all-seeing. But not only that, it also has its roots in Islamic culture. One idea is that Ali, who was the my apologies, Fatima, who was the daughter of Muhammad, when her husband Ali came home one time with another wife, she was apparently so shocked, she was stirring soup, she dropped the ladle and was continued to stir the soup with her hand. And it's just really interesting how a symbol which has lots of different meanings in different religions seems to be shared, and that's something I think that I'm still reflecting upon. It's become very much an important, well-known symbol in Judaism. It's an important symbol in Islamic culture as well, and probably others. I was just putting this together. There were some talks about the hands of being seen, you know, literally in the Stone Age times, and cave paintings and so forth. And so what I'm saying that I'm still thinking about is, what do you think about religion sharing symbols? Often we talk about, or sometimes people in the media or where we see things often think about division. But isn't it fascinating how a symbol has been shared by different faiths and is actually being claimed by both or more than one faith? So it's really interesting, and there's some beautiful jewelry out there. Just type in Jewish Hamza jewelry, and there's an extraordinary range of jewelry. It really is quite lovely. So there you are. Just something for you guys to be thinking about. As always, I'm very, very grateful for your time. Amongst yourselves, feel free to chat, and of course, always like and subscribe. But most importantly, enjoy your learning.